Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. What you're about to see is a conversation between Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who represents Michigan's 13th district, and Congressman Andy Levin, who represents Michigan's 9th district, that we recorded last week. Congresswoman Tlaib and Congressman Levin are freshmen. They have been friends for many years and both came to Congress with organizing experience. Congresswoman Tlaib was a community organizer. Congressman Levin was a labor organizer. And alongside their work fighting for economic justice, for environmental justice, for racial justice, they've also been doing a lot of work within both the Jewish and Muslim American communities to fight anti-Semitism, to fight anti-Muslim and Arab bigotry, and to fight the weaponization of anti-Semitism, the way that white supremacists are trying to pit our communities against each other. So I hope you enjoy this conversation and draw inspiration, as I do, from the work that they are doing together. Thanks. Congresswoman Tlaib, Congressman Levin, thank you so much for. As you know, Bend the Arc is having our national conference right now. We were hoping to be all together in DC, but we are so deeply grateful that you made time to figure out the tech and the Wi-Fi bandwidth and, sharing space with your families to join us right now. We have hundreds of Jews and our progressive movement allies around the country tuning in to build community and organize and be together. So first and foremost, this is a really weird time. How are you both doing? How are your families? How are things in your districts?
I don't know if Andy wanted to go for it, but I know Michigan has been hit pretty hard. But I think all of us know someone that's impacted directly by it. It's not only a death in a family, illness, losing a job, losing their business. A lot of folks are anxious, fearful, so much uncertainty. And so that's it's been really hard serving in Congress during, a pandemic, and prior to that, so many other kind of challenges our country has been going through. But we've been centered around showing up for each other and centered around making sure that we speak truth about everything from, lack of resource, or speaking truth that, we in the community are organizing to, grocery drop-offs, like making sure that we are taking, care of each other, and that is our truth. But it's been, hopeful to see people stepping up, but also really hard to watch a lot of my neighbors lose. One particular mom lost her son, and not being able to really mourn because all around her is illnesses. But again, we're making sure we have each other's back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just echo a lot of what Rashida said. I mean, today already, I went out to Sterling Heights to the senior center to sort of I co-hosted a blood drive there, and people just completely subscribed it in every way, even though we have an utter vacuum of leadership at the top. Americans are stepping up. We want to take care of each other. We want to help each other. So many UAW members and others are in their factories that use to make car parts, and they're making ventilators, or they're making hand sanitizers. They're making PPE of all different kinds. And then I was just or I got to join you two. I was on a sort of a Zoom event with OPEIU local members and leaders who are healthcare workers in the McLaren Macomb Hospital. So just one example of frontline workers, and just what this mix of tragedy and bravery and beauty and horror. It's something that people will be trying to digest and write about and make art about for a long time. The nurses there are holding hands with our loved ones when they can't have their family there. They're taking care of people, and they're having trauma themselves. I mean, one of the leaders of the local has been a nurse for decades. He's never had 8 people die on every shift. I mean, it's very difficult.
Yeah,
So
unprecedented in our
Ariel, I
lifetimes.
feel blessed personally to be healthy, and my kids and my old folks, are okay. But
Yeah.
this is first and foremost a public crisis, and to get out of it, we've got to lead with public health. And the injustices that we're seeing in the public health, ripping open what we knew was always there about all the racial and economic injustice in this country, about the way it's affecting people. There you go.
I'm so glad you named that. Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I've had a bee in my bonnet about for several weeks now is from the moment that we got the first headline about how COVID deaths were disproportionately higher among Black and Brown Americans. It's made me nuts that too many of the headlines just stop there instead of actually naming, oh, and oh, by the way, it's because of systemic racism, systemic economic injustice, and all of the factors that you just named. Like my colleague
Yeah,
Gray
in
Higgins, who
Michigan,
you,
40.
oh, yeah,
Oh, no, I was
no,
just going
please
to
jump in.
say in Michigan for folks.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think in Michigan, 40% of the folks that have passed on because of COVID were African Americans, even though the total population in Michigan of African Americans is less than 15%. So for much of my district, it's environmental racism. We already have high rates of asthma, respiratory issues because we're completely surrounded by, corporate polluters and others, and, lack of access to healthcare and so forth. Again, much of what's happening now is, you know, I think coronavirus is exposing structural racism, environmental racism, that is really horrifying to watch.
yeah, right. We know it's not new, but it's certainly throwing it into a whole different magnitude. Um, my colleague Gray Higgins, who you both met when we were together last spring, said something to me last week that's really stuck with me. That we're in this moment where we could either double down on disaster capitalism, or we could dramatically shift the priorities and the structure of our country and who we think of as essential and who we decide to invest in to pay six figures and of course provide healthcare, and who we don't. So I'm curious, from what you're seeing on the ground in your districts and also from your existing progressive, visionary leadership and the priorities that you came to Congress to fight for, what do you see as the potential for us and for Congress leading us to shift what we think of as normal, to shift what kind of labor and jobs we value, and to try to undo those systemic racism and economic injustice that is not actually new?
I mean, it's huge. Look at how we came at this compared to other countries. Denmark and other countries said, okay, we're going to give every business money to keep every worker on the payroll. It was about workers keeping their livelihood intact during this crisis. Here, we made programs like the Paycheck Protection Act, which in and of them exposed all the racism and injustice, so that who can get the money? Well, the businesses that are banked, that are well connected, that have all these relationships. We opened it up to nonprofits and houses of worship. Well, which of them are getting the assistance? The ones that are well connected and tied into the power structure. So I think we can come out of this with massive social change. Like, let's start with universal health care and Medicare for all. I mean, would we be having all these problems? Rashida, we've had to do backflips in Congress, right? Just to say, oh, everybody who needs to get tested shouldn't have to pay for it. Oh, people who get treated shouldn't have to pay for that. Well, if we had national health care, that wouldn't even be an issue, right? And I think people
Yeah.
are beginning to realize that we could have a different society in which we made taking care of each other and we made the basic dignity of work for everyone much more central. And we'd have better outcomes in a crisis like this by far.
Yeah, and I want to read, I love this quote by Sonia Renee Taylor. And I want to read that before I talk about, what really needs to happen. But I think it really centers around this moment. But she said, quote, "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal other than that we normalized greed and inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." And I just feel very much about this new garment and what that means. And it's about putting really people first and making our government be about people first. And what that really means is universal health care and taking away the for profit schemes. Yes, we fought hard to get testing covered, but now I talked to doctors today from all over the hospitals in Metro Detroit, and these are ER doctors who are saying we really are worried that the private healthcare providers are going to come back and try to push some of this, some of these billings and forcing some of the folks to be able to cover it. And yeah, we're going to fight back against that, of course. But the fact that it's set up in a way that they're even thinking that they can get away with it at this moment. There's also the importance of so much continuation of bailing out those that already have. When I have the third poorest congressional district in the country, and I see, Michigan get to 1 million people applying for unemployment benefits. Much of my neighbors who are considered essential workers not having access to childcare, all of the economic divides and the survivor mode that many of my folks were already in. It's just like 10 times full. It's really showing the importance of us to be able to combat poverty and be able to talk about real, good paying jobs, talking about water as a human right. We've been fighting for access to water in Detroit and throughout, and clean water and Flint and beyond. And what we noticed, I mean, as soon as the coronavirus came up, people were asked to wash their hands 10 times. Well, we have thousands. They say 1 out of 20 Americans don't have a shut off notice. 15 million people are impacted by lack of access to water. And we have alone about 3,000. We think it's more in Detroit alone that don't have access to water during a global pandemic. And so these are things to me that were not normal before. And I don't want to go back to that. I want to use this as an opportunity to show just how broken these systems are right now and why we need to really be intentional about addressing them.
Absolutely. Thank you for both of you for sharing that. Yeah, did you want to jump in, Congressman?
Well, I just want to tell you, Ariel, you can't believe how Rashida's been leading on water for our whole Congress. And I said you this, Rashida. I don't know if you saw it. Even Consumer Reports is now saying, oh, 3/5 of Americans are potentially could have their water shut off if they can't pay their next bill. There is no way that, just from a public health perspective, there's no way we can do what we need to do. Asking people to sanitize, asking people to wash their hands and so forth, if they don't have access to water. And so it really does point the way to a different set of priorities for our country. The another element I would raise, Ariel, in terms of and our sort of Tikkun Olam general orientation is, you've seen all these reports of like, oh, there's all these creatures running around. Oh, people in Kathmandu can see the Himalayas. People in LA don't have so much smog. We can see that if we really took climate change seriously, we really took this level of pollution seriously, and we put in place measures requiring polluters to pay, corporate polluters, and saying we're going to move like within 10 years to implement a plan to move to a carbon free world, that what a huge difference it would make in the lives of people all across the country and the world. And so I think we, basically almost every huge move change towards a more just society came out of some crisis. And we are in
Mm,
a crisis that personally, I just have to admit, I could not have imagined. I never thought I'd be serving during a pandemic like this. And so, uh, even though we're stuck, isolated physically from each other, it's incumbent on us to have more connection than ever, to come together in every way technology allows us to organize for justice in our world, put pressure on Congress to do what we need to do, to make sure that on November 3rd, we send a huge message and have a government that is of the people, by the people, for the people, not for, those who have the most dollars. And um, it's it's not easy, but I see so many beautiful sparks of people trying to do that. So I feel encouraged,
amen.
even though the times are so very tough.
Yeah, I'm so glad you jumped in there because I think you just illustrated, um, in like a nutshell, really why I and we at Bend the Arc wanted to talk to both of you and particularly talk to you together, because it's clear how you really know and get each other and what each other's priorities are and how you support each other. And I think, you both really just showed what you came to Congress to do, right? And people knew when they elected you that you were bold, progressive organizers who came to Congress to really improve people's lives. And I think one of the things that we three and our teams have learned together this year, is just how much we had to work through together. And you two, the work you've had to do supporting each other and within your own communities to fight the forces that are trying to tear us apart. So I want to jump back a little bit to what brought you together, and if you could talk a bit about the solidarity you've work you've done together. We know, and I think Rashida, you in particular, know better than most just how damaging the right wing is. And, where Andy and I deal with anti Semitism, you have to deal with anti Muslim and Arab bigotry and the weaponization of anti Semitism, the way that the right wing is trying to um, falsely accuse, particularly progressive women of color and leaders like you, of anti Semitism in order to divide us. And I think you both have been a real example of how much we are stronger together in the way that we can support each other. And so I'd love for you both to talk about what that experience has been like for you, what you've learned from each other and about our communities. Oh no, wait, we've lost your audio, Rashida.
Rashida, I think you may be muted.
Okay, I unmuted
Oh
myself.
no.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay. Phew.
You're
Oh,
such a
good.
great Andy. I call him Dad sometimes. No, not he's not old enough to be my dad. I'm just saying. But Andy Andy and I, sorry, but Andy and I are knew each other beforehand, and it was actually water that really brought water justice in Detroit that brought us together. He's part of Detroit Jews for Justice. And we also came together on this movement around community benefits agreements in Detroit, where we were really pushing and saying that community need to have a seat at the table. And Andy had worked with folks in Los Angeles and others around this movement, so we were already very much principled in line with combating corporate greed and really believe in people power movements. And so we naturally, I mean, we knew we were going to work together because we believed in those things. I mean, his office already reached out to mine this past week about what can we do to elevate more around water as a human right? How can we get real data from the city of Detroit, accurate data, to be able to use that to, again, getting real, true information about how we can help families right now. And so we continue to do that. I say this all the time, but you sometimes have to outwork and outlove hate. And, but for Andy and I, it's organic. It's not, you see sometimes folks kind of doing it. It's more, it's transactional. I think it's real with Andy and I. It's a real friendship that we really do believe in, this new possible world out there. We believe in clean air. We believe that you should love whoever you want. We believe in all of those kinds of, I think, things that really do bring us together, and it's real and it's genuine. And that's how we push back against those that weaponize. I don't care if it's anti-Semitism or whatever. All you do is it through your actions, and through my actions, through my work with so many of my colleagues, not only Andy, you outwork that form of hate and that form of kind of targeting that continues to happen and will probably continue to happen from the right wing.
Ariel, there's a lot I would like to say here. First of all, let me just tell you a story. So I'm like an old union organizer, right? An environmental organizer and a human rights. I don't even remember what I was doing, but when Rashida was working at the Sugar Law Center, right? And this thing came up about using community benefits agreements in Detroit, which had been discussed, but then it really took hold. And the idea of it is basically that if uh, real estate developers or corporations or somebody building a stadium or whatever, an office building wants to get this money from the state or the city or something, what are the benefits for the people? What are the environmental benefits? Can the workers organize freely? Things. But the point is, I went to this conference, probably organized the whole thing, but I went there, Ariel, and it was there were a lot of people there, but Rashida was the organizer. She wasn't making a big deal of her. She wasn't like, prima donnaing it at all. But it was so obvious to me that she was the one who was sort of driving it, and the sort of level of kind of like intelligence and joy and commitment all wrapped into one. It was just beautiful to watch. So I've been a huge fan of Rashida as an organizer. And then when you come to like this whole question of white supremacy and all the different forms it takes, this is interesting, right? I'm a Jewish boy from burbs representing some of the areas where Jews have lived in recent times, but I represent a lot of Muslims too. I have many mosques in my district. This is America today. And we have a chance to learn about each other, to work together, to love each other across all of these divides in our communities and in our whole world. So we're in a moment of virulent anti-Semitism and rising anti-Semitism in US, in Europe, around the world, and also where other forms of bigotry are on the mark. And I really do think that anybody who is serious about taking on anti-Semitism cannot let it be cheapened, cannot let really our efforts be undermined by trying to divide us in the way that people have. That's not a real fight against anti-Semitism. That's some other political thing going on. So Rashida's been a huge ally in this. I feel like she's been had deep relationships with me and many others in the Jewish community forever, and we're just sort of locking arms from a distance now, to fight all forms of hate and bigotry. And that's it. We'll never stop.
Amen. Thank you for that. One of the guiding principles of Ben the Ark's work for the last several years has been that we are only safe in solidarity. You can't just fight anti-Semitism. You can't just fight anti-Muslim and Arab bigotry. And it's exhausting and maddening and scary work. And it's made less scary. It's made less maddening because of the relationships and partnerships and friendships that we're able to build. And so deeply grateful to be in partnership in this work with you, and to get to introduce our base to both of you, and to the work that you're doing together, not just for our communities, but for everyone. I know we only have a few minutes left, but I was curious, if you are finding things online, books, movies, games that are like helping to keep you going in, I'm sure, the very little time that you have. It's just because you're not in Washington, I know you're not working any less hard, but are there any things that you're finding that give you joy, or good distractions, or that you and your family have been enjoying? What's helping you get through this?
I mean, I know Andy talked about his kids all being home that are grown, but I have an 8-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I'm realizing I have to repeat third grade math. I cannot believe the things I don't know about third grade math. So, just homeschooling both of my boys. My 14-year-old is very independent, doesn't even want me to look over his work, but just helping with my 8-year-old. It's been kind of fun because he reads out loud to me, which we never really had time for before. Just hearing him, trying to pronounce words. It's been very much, I know that I'm privileged, and I'm blessed that I'm able to actually be home with my kids and telework, where I know a lot of my neighbors can't. So I'm centered around knowing that, I'm so grateful for that. But I'm always reminding my children, we're so lucky that we get to do this. So many families can't. A lot of them still have to go to work, and be away from them, and also very fearful time that they might get sick while they go to work. But it has been really fun, because I didn't realize my 8-year-old was so funny. He's really humorous. He asks me a lot about my work. Andy, I got to tell you stories. It's hilarious. He goes, "Who's your boss?" And I said, "Well, there's like 700,000 people that are my boss." He goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, honey, I work for people." And he's like, "But you tell people what to do." And I said, "Well, I work with people and we talk about what needs to be done." And I said, "Do you hear me saying, hey, we need to do this and that?" And he's like, "Yeah." But it's really fun just kind of hearing him starting to see me, because I'm working at home, and he's listening to the conversation. He knows how to say Pelosi's name now. Like, is that Pelosi? It's just really been somewhat of a joy to be mom at home, and kind of see my 8-year-old has no idea. I think really what I really do, or what is actually happening. But it has been, I don't know, it's been fun. I've been journaling about it, so when he gets older, he can see the things that he says to me.
That's great.
Well, I'd say mine is also really centered around family, Ariel. Mary and I have 4 kids, 26, 24, and 22-year-old sons, and a 14-year-old daughter. And my oldest son is a journalist. He covers public education in Detroit for Chalkbeat. But my next 2 kids are suddenly home. My 24-year-old is finishing his master's degree, and my 22-year-old's finishing his college degree remotely. And my 14-year-old is stuck at home doing her freshman work in high school. And it's been such a silver lining for Mary and me. I mean, to have all this. How about you? You can see around me, I'm in the basement because everybody else has all the other space in the house. So this is where Dad belongs, in the basement. But we watched Unbox. And I mean, truthfully, we are besieged in Congress by constituent service side of this. Somebody stuck in Peru and can't get home. Somebody stuck in the Philippines. People can't get their unemployment insurance. People can't, truly small businesses can't get their PPP loans, whatever. And then your family's right there for those of us lucky in a situation. And then, like, okay, it's 9 p.m. We're watching get over here, Dad. And I'm like, okay. And it's just been tremendous. And, playing street hockey and basketball with them, I mean, that's absolutely what's kept me grounded. And taking groceries to my dad, which I can't admit to him that I actually go to the grocery store. So it's all just saying it's all curbside or delivery. I would never
Yeah,
go to
I
the
think I
grocery
saw
store.
a photo of you, Andy, with the groceries in your bag. Yeah, like sneaking it. It's very funny.
That's great.
So Ariel,
Thank you.
just a reminder to everybody listening, I think, an African-American Baptist pastor said this to me, Pastor Bland Jr., who said, we're a country that's not divided, but disconnected. During this pandemic, even though we really are like humanly, like physically disconnected, I feel like we're connecting a lot more than we did before. I just hope people don't forget the importance of that. I think that's the way we really are able to combat all the pain of oppression, all the pain that we see happening in the world. And so I think about what he said that when he said that to me, but I think about it in this moment of this pandemic has somehow connected a lot of people that weren't connected before. And so I just hope people, really continue to do that as really as we transition out of this really terrible time.
That is a most perfect way to end. I know you all have to get back to supporting your districts, and I am just so deeply grateful that you took time to connect with me and to connect with the Bend the Arc movement and everybody watching in their own homes right now. Thank you for the work that you're doing to fight to get us through this and to get our country to a better place, and for the example that you provide us of solidarity and how we support each other and how we can our communities can have each other's backs. So thank you. It's really good to see you both, and looking forward to being in person again sometime.